I've just started recording this meeting so that you know. And
Yes.
the reason why we're doing it is because there are many people who are not able to join us today. We will be recording this first half an hour, the time when Letty addresses the topic. And then when that one half an hour is finished and we go to the conversation and sharing and communication part, we'll turn the recording off so that we feel we can share and we stay within our community. We are also doing something new today, which we haven't tried before, and that is sharing this address part live on Facebook. It's also one of the reasons is that we only had capacity for 100 and more people wanted to join. So we just thought we'll see how that works, so that other people can enjoy what Letty has to say about the topic. So that's all I have on my little list. And I think we can spotlight Letty's video.
Yes,
so
it is spotlighted.
Yes, okay, great. And I think, go, please.
We're ready. Okay, great.
Yes.
Can I already put it on Facebook? Can I start?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm starting.
Okay, and maybe, yes, and maybe I just want to say one thing, you know, just to open the floor for you, Letty. It's, you know, we're all home. I'm home with 4 children whom I have to support in homeschool, and all of our teachers are online with these children, trying to support them in the home online learning. So obviously the question how to best support children in these days as a teacher is a very hot topic. There are many elementary and primary and adolescent teachers out there who are struggling with this. So that's the reason why we thought Letty could help us, because she's actually quite active in the online world, and she's also an experienced 6 to 12 elementary guide. So that's why the topic today. And then next week, hopefully, it will be Jenny Hogland addressing how to do the same thing with the adolescent students. So today is about elementary children and online education. Okay, go.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Mirka. So today's topic is how do we maintain Montessori principles for the elementary child in an online home environment? So first off, you know, there's a lot of disagreement about the terminology of what we're doing. Some people call it online learning, some people call it virtual learning, some people call it distance learning, homeschooling, blended learning. It tends to be in the United States that people are adopting the term distance learning the most, because if we say online learning, then that gives sort of the impression that the children are sitting in front of the screen a lot. And really, when you're doing this kind of a program, that's not the only thing that's happening. They're doing things, they're doing work from a distance, you know, they're at a distance from their school. So I'm gonna probably refer to it more as that, just so you know, because that's sort of the terminology that I have adopted for that purpose. So technology serves 2 purposes in distance learning. The first one is the sharing of the knowledge, like the lessons that you're giving and the content. And the second purpose is fostering connections and building relationships. So we're going to actually talk about both of those things, but we're going to specifically highlight the second part of that, because I want to talk about how that sort of dovetails into the psychological characteristics of the elementary child and how we can best build a distance learning program with the elementary child's needs in mind from the lens of, from the Montessori perspective. And I also kind of want to say, this isn't necessarily distance learning either. I saw a great term the other day. They call it emergency learning, because, you know, in a real distance learning program, the teachers would have proper training. They would be rolling this out carefully and methodically. There would be lots of conversation before it happens. And the teachers would, you know, get training on the tools and the platforms they need to use. The children would be oriented to it properly before we throw them into this. The parents would have an orientation on what this is about. and people would be choosing it. But none of those things have happened. So this is what makes this especially difficult. And, you know, Mirka invited me to be here, and I'm very flattered. And I also want to say I'm not an expert, although I think that I'm as expert as anybody can be, because we're all experts together in this. We have been doing this for 3 or 4 weeks at the most. And so, you know, there's a lot of sort of learning happening along the way, and a lot of people have been doing a lot of great things. So what does a teacher need to know to be successful in this kind of work? So you need to have an understanding of the technology tools needed to deliver the distance learning program. What am I using? Am I using Zoom? Am I using Google Classroom? Am I using Seesaw, Clever? You may have never heard of any of these things, but these are all like sort of the different kinds of platforms that people are using. You need training on these tools, and you know, sometimes your school will offer this training, but maybe they don't know any of this stuff either. You might need to go on YouTube and train yourself. You also need, the teachers need to understand best strategies for delivering the content, because it's different than when you're in person. As an example, a lot of teachers have reported that they need to be more animated when they're online, because, you know, you're not there to see the body language, and, you know, you're not 3-dimensionally live with somebody. And so in order to stay with engagement, you need to be a little more animated with your hands and things like that. So you have to kind of figure out what's the best way to deliver the content. And you have to figure out how to assess the effectiveness. Are they retaining this information that we're putting over online? Are they engaged? A lot of teachers are reporting, particularly for their lower elementary children, they're not sure if they're retaining the information that is being shared. And we don't have a lot of data yet to show, is this actually going to be effective long-term? Because again, we're jumping into this quickly without any knowledge around that. So there's some important things to remember, like, well, actually, let's talk about current emerging practices for distance learning. And I say emerging because every day it's like changing all the time. So for example, a lot of teachers are using live video conferencing, either with whole class, small groups, one-on-one, and then they're also holding an office hour time so people can pop in and ask questions whenever. Then there are teachers who are doing pre-recorded videos that they are posting to YouTube or some other platform and giving the parents instructions on how do we go about like doing follow-up work and things like that, and giving them direction in that way. Some teachers are doing a mixture of both of those things, like they're doing lessons via YouTube, but they're doing community building via online video conferencing. Also, a lot of teachers are using websites for skill building, like math websites to practice your math facts, or the Khan Academy. And it tends to be that what I've noticed, you know, in all these different groups I'm in, and the teachers I'm working with, and the schools I'm working with, is that most elementary children are spending between 1 and 3 hours online. And if they're at the 3-hour mark, it's not like 3 hours in a row, it's broken up. So let me give you an example. Montessori in the public sector, which is a wonderful group in the United States, put out sort of some distance learning guidelines for their group of schools that they find to be working well. And how they started out is they have a half an hour in the morning of like a community meeting, and there might be announcements, there's relationship building, things like that. And then throughout the morning, each child gets a 30-minute lesson, and they know what time their lesson is happening. Just like in the classroom, a lot of times teacher will write on the board like, oh, you're having a lesson at 9:30 or whatever. They know my lesson is from 9:30 to 10, and then they come back on during that time. And when they are not on, they are doing follow-up work. They have choices that the teachers have given them and whatnot. And then in the afternoon, they have a shared read aloud time for half an hour, or they might do a literature circle. And then once a week, everybody gets like a 15 to 20-minute conference, like a one-on-one conference time. And so that works out to be about 1.5 hours to 2 hours a day if you kind of go in that kind of a structure. That's just one example though. You know, I talk to different teachers and they have different ways they want to do it. In some communities, certain things work better than others. For example, some people really love taping and recording their videos ahead of time, because then the children can watch them over and over again, and the parents too, who are trying to help them and going, I don't know what I'm doing. But then some people feel that that doesn't work very well, because then there's not the interaction, and like if the child has questions, and how is there a way to sort of build the momentum and excitement of the lesson. So there's a lot of different things to be thinking about with that. And it's a little bit crazy. So there's some things to be thinking about when you're starting out. So this is like the beginning of the school year times 100, okay? It's like the beginning of the school all over again. It's even more intense because everybody's learning something new. It's not just the children who are learning something new right now, it's the teachers, it's the parents. And so, you know, to expect the children to jump into online learning super fast, and, you know, when you know in the classroom it takes 6 weeks to normalize the class at a minimum, you know, we're expecting a lot from our children and our teachers. So it's really important to keep in mind that maybe it's good to roll this out a little bit slowly, and maybe start out with, you know, being online once a day with them, and then stretch it out to twice a day. You need to look at your community and see what they can handle. And everybody's reacting to online differently. I'm on the board of a school, and I was talking to an elementary teacher there, and she said, you know, the child I thought who would have the worst time at this experience is doing amazing. You know, he's autistic, he struggles in the classroom, but he's like a shining star in this online world. And then the student who is the easiest student in the classroom, who just is, you know, always working and productive, is having a very hard time being online. Because it's also important to remember that this can actually trigger sadness in the children when they go online and they see their friends, but they actually can't be with their friends. Because for some people, they would rather just ignore it and pretend like it's not happening. And when we force them to go online, then that's sort of enacting a little bit of, like, I guess you could almost say trauma for some people, you know, because this is a traumatic event that we're going through. So that's, you know, the important other thing to remember is that not everybody is going to be able to participate at the maximum level. And we shouldn't expect that right now, because again, this is not a normal time. This is not normal life. We can't expect parents, teachers, and children to be responding to this as if it had been methodically thought out and rolled out and everybody chose it. So we have to have some flexibility as teachers. And I know some teachers are getting frustrated because they're like, oh, this parent isn't, you know, doing anything. And I'm like, well, maybe that parent is losing their job. Maybe that parent is, you know, struggling with their child because they're usually at school from 7 to 6 and they haven't had this much time with them and they're not sure how to, you know, engage them. There's a lot we're expecting from parents right now, and we just have to really be nice to them, but also nice to ourselves, because the teacher's learning curve has been immense as well. Many people have never even been on Zoom or figured that out yet, or online video conferencing. So, you know, some parents also are working while they're homeschooling their children. Some have multiple children at home and they can't get on the computer at all these different scheduled times. You know, if you have 3 or 4 children at a school and you have like a rich online experience going on, that can actually be a little stressful. They're like, okay, Johnny's lesson's at 9:30 and I have to set him up on the computer. Then Sally's is at 10:45 and I need to go set her up on the computer. No, wait a minute, I need to use the computer and there's only 2 computers right now. So anyway, just so you know, somebody just texted me saying the live ended on Facebook. So I don't know if anybody wants to check in on that.
Okay, thank you. Sveta is around. Thank you for letting us know. She'll check it.
You're welcome. And also, you know, we have to, a really kind of a good rule of thumb is to offer them, you know, sort of a choose your own adventure, some resources that they can use, and they can take those resources or not, and not to have super high expectations right now. Like we want to be able to meet the children where they're at and the parents where they're at, and that means us adjusting and doing things a little bit differently than we might. So when we're building this program, we need to think about the psychological characteristics of the elementary child in the distance learning environment. So, again, I've talked to some teachers, and kind of what a lot of them have been doing is, oh, I'm giving a lesson online, and then they're going off and doing some follow-up work when I'm done with the lesson. Well, if you think about that, that's like a very traditional model of education, and we're Montessorians, and we want to try to give them something different, and we need to think about, what are their psychological characteristics and how can we build the program around them versus creating a program and fitting them into that program. So rushing through the psychological characteristics, not rushing, but going somewhat quickly. So one of the psychological characteristics is the group instinct. So elementary children really want to be with each other. They're very social, they want to work together in groups. So in an online setting, you want to make the live online settings as interactive as possible. This is not you delivering a lesson and I'm delivering it for that 20 or 30 minutes, and then they go off and do their follow-up work all alone in their house, or their mom or their brother's helping them or whatever. So you don't want to be just imparting the information and sending them off. You want to keep them with you, actually, if you can. So I know that some teachers in the Montessori and the public sector that I mentioned, when they give the lessons to the children, they either stay online with them and they do the follow-up, and they each go get materials that they need for their follow-up and come back to the computer and chat with their friends while they're doing their follow-up work and, talk and discuss with it. And the teacher is there kind of supporting that to happen. Sometimes a teacher will create a separate little breakout room off to the side for those 4 or 5 children who are in that lesson who are working on something together, so that they can keep going while she might be working with somebody else as well. Of course, that's you getting more tech savvy, but if you want to start out easy, just keep them all on with you. And in the regular classroom environment, you would be offering follow-up options. They would be choosing different things, and they'd go out into the environment and then talk through it together. But that's not going to happen organically here, so we have to create that experience for them. And you are not going to be able to let them choose their follow-up work in the same way, because you don't know the resources and materials they have in their houses right now. So you're going to have to create choices still. You can still choose between 2 or 3 things. It's good for you to offer 2 or 3 follow-up choices that are manageable, that they can do in their house. And it could be even like you are taping a bunch of white paper together. You have white paper from your computer printer, you're taping it together to create a timeline or a long story or a huge math problem. So, there's ways definitely for them to do follow-up work, and they can sit on the screen and talk with each other while they're doing it. They might even be doing different things in the classroom. They would probably be using the exact same thing. But just having them being together is going to help with that group instinct as much as possible. You also want to create online opportunities for them to have discussions, debates, book clubs. These are things that they can do where they're interacting with each other. Again, you don't have to be the one going blah, 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 imparting all the information. They can be, leading and facilitating things as well. So this is also a great opportunity for them to sharpen their presentation skills. And so maybe when they're done with their follow-up work, they come back the next day to their little group and everybody shows what they did in the computer screen, or maybe they do it at the end of that session. You kind of have to experiment around that. But anyway, presentation time is great for community building. Another psychological characteristic is separation from the family. So this is a really interesting point to make, because I've talked to a lot of guides who feel a little anxious about the fact that they're sitting in parents' living rooms right now, and then they get a little bit annoyed when the kid's sitting there at the computer and they're all, "Mom, go get me my pencil." And the teacher's like, "What? He needs to go get his own darn pencil." And and then sometimes the parents will come and sit there right next to the lesson, and because they're so excited. Some teachers enjoy this because they're like, oh, like they get to have a window in on this, but if the parent is being not intrusive or whatever. So the children have been going to school without their parents, and so we want them to continue to have that sense of like that school is their special place. Just as you wouldn't want a parent to come in and walk through the classroom talking to the children, You wouldn't want them interrupting your online lessons either. So you're going to need to create some guidelines, just as you do when they come in and observe in the classroom. You have a little, guideline thing about, this is, our expectations for families during lesson times. Of course, you're going to be very, thoughtful in how you express this, but you're basically going to be like, okay, can you please step away to the sidelines? And we want to encourage the children to talk to the teacher directly and their peers, and have you kind of step out of that. So I think that's a really important thing to think of, because that's starting to come up more and more as people are online, that they're finding parents are, getting kind of excited, and they have to hold on with that a little bit. Children also at this age have physical stamina. They have a lot of energy. So they need to be able to engage in big projects around the home. This can happen through large practical life skills. So again, you can give the parents a list of different kinds of practical life activities that elementary kids like to do. I always joke around and tell everybody that, 1 year in elementary, I started, one kid loved doing large practical life work. And so I just had him wash my car every Friday, and he loved it. And then, so there was a whole group of kids who were washing my car, and then they started washing my admin assistant's car, and they got into this whole car washing thing. So anyway, you need to provide activities for physical activity. A lot of that will be offline. Some of that can be online though. You could have aerobic exercise videos, yoga videos, dancing videos. You can even have the kids have a dance party together. You just put on your playlist, and that would be fun. Some schools, this was an idea I thought of in my own mind, and then some people are doing it now, so I was so excited, but some schools are doing virtual recess. So they just turn on the screen for a half an hour. I mean, unfortunately, because of all these Zoom bombers who are popping onto Zoom, you have to stay there and make sure all is well, but you're not going to be intervening very much, because that's their special time together. You can set up an online recess time for them to talk, and they could dance together and get their physical gross motor activity out as well. So, just because they can be in front of the computer at elementary level for lengths of time doesn't mean they should. So we want to use that need for physical activity and find other ways outside for them to engage in that. Another psychological characteristic is moral development. So children of this age have a sense of justice and fairness, and they really want to understand things for themselves and use their own judgment. So this is a perfect use for online class meetings. Children can discuss situations that arise, and they can, have an avenue sort of to pursue their thoughts around that. You can create small lessons where children are discussing and debating issues of morality that are important to them. You could play the game like, would you rather, if you see a spider in your bathroom, would you rather kill it, or would you rather take it outside? That's actually a really fun game to play with elementary kids, because then they say, wait a minute, no, killing it is wrong. And oh, why is it wrong? It's only an insect, So you can facilitate small group, discussions, around moral development. And that can be a really fun way to make the online learning really reflect, what our values in Montessori. Another characteristic is hero worship. So children choose heroes in their life based upon people they admire, and they love to hear stories about them and do research reports. So you want to draw attention to heroes and nurture their interest in them. Heroes both past and present. It could be scientists, inventors, musicians, athletes, actors. So this is a hard time in life right now. And so orienting them to find heroes in their lives will give them hope and inspiration right now, because we kind of need that right now. So, teaching them how to write a biography, give a lesson on how to write a biography, and have them do research on some of their favorite heroes, and then have them present that and discuss it. I really think there's a huge value in orienting them towards hero worship right now as something that can give them hope and seeing the positive and the good things happening in the world. Another psychological characteristic is powers of imagination. So elementary children are no longer exploring through the senses. They can use their imagination to conjure up images of something that they've never seen before or things that they've experienced in the past. They can manipulate ideas and images in their mind. So as a guide, this is actually a great time for you to strengthen your storytelling skills to touch their imagination. You know, we have a lot of story lessons, you know, fundamental needs of humans, migration, the 3 phases of history, you know, the leaf makes its own food. So a lot of people are finding that having like really small lessons online are kind of hard, and doing math lessons obviously are kind of hard with you don't have your materials. But you can get your charts and tell your stories and do your storytelling lessons, and you're sparking their imagination. So really, you know, really hone in on those story lessons, figure out which ones are story lessons, and those are the easiest ones that you can give online and deliver with most authenticity. Another thing is development of the intellect. That's another psychological characteristic. The kids are interested in how and why. They have a thirst for wanting to know more. They have huge intellectual powers. They're developing their reasoning mind. Again, they want to explore and discuss. So you want to sow as many seeds as possible. A great idea for this would be sharing YouTube videos on history, science, and geography topics that you find interesting and have discussions. And those can be related to, you know, the cosmos. You know, there's a lot of great science ones, there's history ones. Of course, you're going to vet them, but you can have them watch a YouTube video when you're not together. That can be one of their sort of assignments that they do. And then when you come together, you discuss that. And then, you know, that really appeals to their intellect, you know, and developing of their intellect. The other characteristic, another characteristic, and we're almost done, I know we're almost done with time, is powers of abstraction. So the second plane child moves from the concrete to the abstract. They can carry the world in their minds in the way that they can't with their hands. So, you know, while the children are using materials in the classroom, obviously, and a lot of them are working on different, for example, math materials, unless they're the youngest child in the classroom or one of the younger ones, most of them will have abstracted some aspect of math. Like, for example, maybe they're working on the checkerboard in the classroom, but they have abstracted addition really well. So, you know, you might want to challenge them by saying, hey, can you make the longest addition problem that you can think of? And, you know, have them tape different papers together or whatever, you know, have them solve like the longest one that they can. So, you know, you can have them practice the things they've already abstracted at home, and that's not going to be too hard. You can also check with the teacher if you don't know, you know, if you're a parent, and be like, okay, well, where's my child abstracting right now? And then you can kind of focus on that there. Another psychological characteristic is great work. So repetition in the second plane doesn't happen from doing the same thing over and over again like it does in 3 to 6. It happens through variety and elaboration. So they want to demonstrate concepts through large projects. Again, you know, taping several pieces of paper together, or if you have paper bags from the grocery store and you can cut them up and use them as a canvas for a project. If you have cardboard for recycling. I'm trying to mention things that a lot of people have, because not everybody has poster board from the craft store or special clays or whatever, but everybody has scraps around their house that the children can do great work with. And so, you know, helping the parents sort of like think of the materials around the house that they can use to do that great work. You're definitely going to need to partner with the parents in the great work endeavor a little bit, because you can't really deliver that online in the same way, but you can entertain their great ideas. You know, sometimes they have fantastical ideas and you can be having them sharing that, you know, online, and that sort of is a great work in the digital format. Another psychological characteristic, the last one, is sense of responsibility. So children of this age are developing a huge sense of responsibility, not only for their self, but for their community. So this is a great time for the children to be learning new chores around the house and helping out with younger siblings. So, you know, my best friend has homeschooled her children her whole life. And, you know, she was telling me one day, Letty, homeschoolers expect the older children to take care of the younger children. And I know that that's not like, you know, maybe the, you know, most widely accepted okay thing that people would be okay with, because there's a thought of not wanting to overburden older children. But there is something to be said about having them help take care of the younger children and helping them develop that sense of responsibility. In the classroom, the older children, you know, help, you know, nurture the younger children as well. So, you know, you can like talk to, this is really a good thing to have sort of a little mini parent education or create a handout for parents on, you know, here are all the different kinds of chores that your child can do that are age appropriate. There's one floating around somewhere that I saw a few years ago that's somewhere online, like, what can you expect for somebody who's 6 to 7, who's 8 to 10, who's 10 to 12, you know, what kinds of things can they do? So this, you know, you want to strengthen their ability to care for others, and that helps them increase their empathy. So yeah, and then there's some final thoughts here, and then I'm almost done, is that so you can do Montessori without the materials, but you can't do it without the philosophy. And, you know, I think that that's a really important thing to think of. I remember Angeline Lillard in her Science Behind the Genius has the 8 principles for Montessori education. And if you notice, like, not one of them has to do with a material. So like, you can really make sure you're doing the philosophy even if you're not using the materials. And again, I think you can bring in your charts and story lessons and things like that. You know, it's a little bit hard to bring in math stuff. Some people are getting creative though and sending printouts of fraction insets that people are cutting out and using at home. And there are some things that you can do, and you know, you're gonna have to think about that. Another thing, another final thought is we cannot meet everybody's needs with a single solution. We don't yet know what works and what doesn't work. We can only adjust after we try things. So Maria Montessori did that. Like when she developed this pedagogy, she, you know, looked at what worked, what didn't work. She got rid of what didn't work, refined what was working, and continually experimented over years. We've been doing this for 3 weeks, okay? So, or a month or whatever. So we can't really, you know, we can only know after we've tried. And a lot of teachers are scared to try because we're given our albums and our presentations. And this whole idea of, oh, let me try something out of the box might be a little bit novel. But if administrators, and I'm sure there's administrators on this call, would really give your teachers permission and let them take a risk to try different things. You know, if something's not working and your teacher's telling you it's not working, I usually try to say, well, try it a couple of times to really see if it's not working. But if it's clearly not working, give them permission to experiment and adjust and try new things. What's going to work for one community in Prague may not work for another community in Greece, you know? So, and even within the United States, a small school, a large school, you need to try different things. And the last final thought I have is, like, we're going to make lots of mistakes when we're doing this, and mistakes is how we perfect things. You know, this is, you know, one of the needs and tendencies is perfection. So we work towards perfection, but we only do that through making mistakes. That's the only way we grow. Again, Maria Montessori was a scientist. She observed and she adjusted along the way, and that's something we have to do too. So anyway, those are my final thoughts today on that. And I hope that you enjoyed that as I speed talked through every thought that I had in my mind today. Actually, there's many more, but that's probably sufficient. And if now at this point, I guess we can entertain some questions that I may or may not have the answer to.
I think so. You really can speak fast, I must say.
I usually, when I do webinars, I try to speak slowly because I know that, you know, but I also knew we only had a half an hour and I wanted to get it in. Yes. So
I mean, I realize right now that asking you to cut this to a half an hour address was really a crazy idea because there's so much. But it was for me it was a really great overview.
I can also send an outline to people of what I talked about too, or send it to you and you can send it to people or something. So.
Yes,